how then can the season of Lent help me to develop a childlike heart? Now, we remember that in the season of Lent, we have three main practices. Those practices are almsgiving, fasting or abstinence, and prayer. And I want to suggest to you that each of these practices of Lent can lead us into developing the same qualities that I have just spoken about of children. Almsgiving is what leads us to charity, the first quality of a child. And during the season of Lent, all of us can practice some charity. Even children can learn to forego one or the other thing in order that they can reach out to other children, reach out to other people. Now, by the way, almsgiving is not just about handing out something in terms of money or food, but it can even be things like time or service. There are many people who just need a little help, elderly people who need somebody to help them to clean their house, to clean their home, to run errands for them. All these things are elements which we can bring into being charitable. We can be charitable with our time. We can be charitable with our resources. We can even be charitable with our words, the things that we say to people. So during Lent, we want to use the practice of almsgiving as a means to be able to acquire the gift of generosity and of charity. Secondly, the second practice of Lent is fasting or abstinence. Now, what does fasting do to us? Fasting leads us to humble ourselves. It leads us to deprive ourselves of things which we ordinarily would like to have. And so fasting leads to a humble spirit. The person who abstains places his neighbor, the needs of his neighbor, ahead of his own. He learns to deprive himself, to deny himself or herself of something. And that is what teaches us to be humble. We have to remember what Paul tells us in the letter to the Philippians, that even though he was in the form of God, Jesus did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. He emptied himself, becoming humbler even to the point of dying on the cross. So fasting means emptying of oneself, and that emptying of oneself is what leads to humility. Fasting is also another way of ensuring that we are growing in purity. When we fast, we abstain from things which could lead us further and further away from God. So sometimes we fast and we put aside food, we put aside entertainment, we put aside certain pleasures in order to purify our heart. And by purifying our heart in this way, we are being led closer and closer to an innocence of life. So fasting and abstinence would lead us to two of these virtues: humility and innocence, or purity of heart. Now, finally, the third practice of Lent, as you know, is prayer. And what do we do in prayer? In prayer, we speak to God, but also we listen to God. And especially that is why in our prayer, we need to accompany our prayer with reading the Bible, where we can hear, we can meditate on the voice of God who speaks to us during our prayer. When we have our quiet time, it is always important to stop at a point and listen to God's voice when we have read the scripture. So prayer helps us to the L, the listening to the voice of God. And after having listened to God, then we must be docile to do what God is telling us to do. That is how to be teachable. That is how to be docile. And prayer therefore leads us both to learn to listen to the voice of God and to be docile. So we see that the Lenten practices can actually lead us to have a childlike heart. Almsgiving will teach us C, charity. Fasting and abstinence will teach us H, humility, and I, innocence of heart. Prayer will lead us to L, listening, and it will also lead us to be teachable or to be docile, D. This is how Lent and its practices can actually lead us to have a truly childlike heart. Now, who could inspire us into having, during the season of Lent, a truly childlike heart? One of the people that we can look up to is the Saint Teresa of the Child Jesus. Teresa, a remarkable saint whom we know very well, is the one who teaches what is known as the little way. Teresa used to say, well, I cannot be a big saint like Teresa of Avila or John of the Cross. I can't be a martyr like Peter. I can't be a great teacher like Thomas Aquinas. And therefore, I must find a little way, if you like, a child's way of attaining holiness or of attaining perfection. And that is the calling that we all have. There are some who are children by virtue of their age. They are young, they are children. But all of us are children of God. And therefore, all of us can do something at least little during the season of Lent in order to grow in the likeness of Christ. Each and every one can do something. That is why the theme of being childlike is so appropriate. Some are children by virtue of their age, but all of us are children by virtue of being children of God. And Teresa of the Child Jesus teaches us how we can use a childlike spirit to grow in the spiritual life. Teresa says, I understand then that God is love. Like Saint Teresa of Avila, I can sanctify myself through all my little acts, a smile, a word, or a look, provided that everything is done in love. What happiness! From now on, sanctity will no longer frighten me. My tears were flooding like an inexhaustible spring. And this is what Teresa says. We can use very little things. Any little thing can be used to please God, can be used as a little way of walking in the path of Lenten perfection. So this is what the invitation to childlikeness is like. It's not about doing big things. Children, you should learn to do little things, to help somebody who is carrying a heavy load, to greet somebody with a smile, to be patient when somebody says something wrong to you or very harsh to you, to respond always with a kind word, to say your little prayers like the Angelus, to read little passages of scripture, to attend Mass, to do the little things. And that is what we are invited to do as each of us tries with a childlike heart to embrace the spirit of Lent. Today, we have looked at what Lent is. We have tried to answer the question why we should have a childlike heart. We have asked what the qualities of a childlike heart are. We have said C means charity, H means humility, I means innocence, L means listening, and D means docility. We have said that fasting, prayer, and almsgiving can actually help us to develop these childlike qualities. And we have said that we can look to Saint Teresa, the little flower, who teaches us the little way in which everyone is able to do something in the spirit of Lent, to have a childlike heart and to embrace the spirit of Lent. Today has been our first day. We want to see Jesus embracing Lent with a childlike heart. Subsequently,